So it's been about a month since I pissed off all the blindly optimistic FNAF spurgs in the community with my undisproven takes on Springtrap, and a lot of people have been asking me, has my opinion changed? Well, as someone like me who was heavily looking forward to this chapter, I genuinely believe that Springtrap is the worst and weakest killer since Dredge came out in 2022, and most people don't even realize why. To put it simply, before I go into more detail, he's pretty much the only killer in the game where just playing him actively buffs the survivors in ridiculous ways and not just to counter your power, as well as having multiple levels of built-in counterplay that he doesn't need, an awful, easy-to-dodge range attack that only works properly on fresh installs and AFKs, and a constant 110 movement speed for absolutely no reason when you have your axe, when far superior range killers like Artist and Unknown are constantly 115 the entire time. I assumed he would be buffed or changed in some significant way after the PTB, but if you actually say it how it is and call him boring recycled garbage, you'll be crucified. So your favorite white content creators are actually, wait, people don't really like it when I say that? So your favorite cracker content creators are constantly hyping him up like he's the best thing since sliced bread. Some are unironically calling him an A-tier killer, but in my opinion, he's probably a mid to low C-tier at best. And have you noticed something, or is it just me? Remember when Ghoul came out and all the Survivor 1 tricks were complaining about facing him every match because he had a ridiculously high pick rate and he was very strong and oppressive? Yeah, you haven't seen many Springtraps lately, have you? And the ones you have seen either lose or have to play their heart out to beat solo queue teams. It's making me think maybe this killer is kinda bad? And listen, I know I made a similar video when he first came out on the PTB giving my initial thoughts on why he was lame and reskinned, and after all the comments and even video responses I got, I basically haven't heard any good argument or reason as to how he's not that isn't you think of something better than a multi-million-dollar company or the classic let people enjoy things.
All this for a hunter's reward? Chat, you know what your grandma said? Be grateful, all right? Be grateful, you know? Like, what, your wife leaves you? You get another wife and you're like, all of this for a wife rework? Shut up, you know? It's okay, let's enjoy what we get. Let's not be such killjoys, man.
So him being recycled and not fitting the character and all that is not going to be the topic of this video, despite how incredibly lame it is. I'm going to be mainly focusing on his strength as a killer compared to other killers, and the numerous ways they fucked him up. So let's begin. Starting off, is he really the weakest killer since Dredge? I mean, look, he has a ranged attack. That's something, right? Look at all these clip farms people are hitting. I mean, no other killer can really hit behind obstacles and walls like this, except for Artist and Unknown and Pyramid Head and Huntress and Plague and Vecna and Trickster with an add-on, so he's pretty unique, right? I mean, look at all these clips you've seen of people hitting AFK players behind walls. Yeah, no. This shouldn't even be considered as an argument for his strength because it only exists to be flashy and isn't practical at all. It's just made for you to play him and be like, oh my god, I hit that dude, when it's like a survivor running in a straight line. Throwing an axe into the air with a tiny hitbox, smaller than Huntress's hitbox, by the way, to try to predict that a survivor will run in a straight line with no thoughts in their head, just to post it in a clip farm compilation on YouTube and get 3 views. It's not particularly engaging to me, but to each their own. I'm just getting this out of the way because these cherry-picked clips of these Springtrap players who throw the entire game to hit 1 shot on a survivor not paying attention after missing 20 of those said shots are not viable in the slightest, and this is a conversation about his strength. I've already expressed how his axe, which Springtrap throws by the way, this is what Springtrap does in DBD, just okay. Anyways, his axe is indisputably a much weaker and somehow less unique version of other ranged killers' powers. And the only reason why these content creators are eating him up is for 2 reasons, besides being canceled if they don't like him. One is because he just borrows things that work from other killers and does them far worse, but they are concepts that have proven to work in the past despite little to no innovation in his kit. 2 is, more importantly, because he's Springtrap. I can guarantee you if he launched with Skull Merchant's old power, people would still be singing his praises to high heavens on immense copium because he's from FNAF and people are gonna like him regardless. Funnily enough, I think Skull Merchant's old power would have fit him far better than this axe, despite the vastly unhealthier gameplay. His axe is extremely weighty and has incredibly low velocity, almost on the level of Unknown, without the massive AoE or bouncing properties of his projectile. And this is handy when trying to clip farm and throw the game, but for the most part, it's just a hindrance. People have been complaining that Springtrap players don't go for cool shots or even decently ranged shots and just back rev you, and there's a reason for that. It's not rewarding at all. Anything you can find in Springtrap, you can just find done better by far stronger and more fun killers. His projectile is the easiest range attack in the game for survivors to dodge, and it's not even close. There's a reason why basically everyone has abandoned him by now and gone back to playing Blight or whatever because the honeymoon phase is over. Ghoul stuck around, Dracula stuck around, but despite being from such a popular franchise and the most hyped character ever, Springtrap is barely seen anymore because he's just a reskinned Huntress with built-in counterplay he doesn't need. The funny thing is he likely won't be significantly buffed either. In my original Springtrap video, I talked about how he would likely be buffed buffed like many killers past their PTB. Houndmaster went from an arguably C tier janky killer in her PTB to a strong A tier nowadays. Vecna was incredibly clunky and weak in his PTB, but got giga buffed on launch and multiple times since. We haven't really had a killer that's this weak on launch since debatably Knight, but even though Knight was terrible on launch, I still think he was stronger than Springtrap on launch, because at the very least he was good at something. Skull Merchant too. Both of these killers had niches that you couldn't do with other killers despite their kind of mind-numbing gameplay on launch. And obviously when I say Springtrap is the weakest killer since Dredge, I'm talking about when killers themselves got added to live servers. Because Skull Merchant, despite coming out after Dredge, is obviously weaker than him now due to intentional nerfs. So you're probably wondering, why do I say it's our fault in the title? How is it our fault that an incredibly weak and recycled killer comes and we're all blind on Copia and pretending he's strong or fun, despite not doing anything new because he's Springtrap from Five Nights at Freddy's? Well, do you remember the killers I mentioned earlier who came out fairly recently in the grand scheme of things, Vecna and Houndmaster? They were incredibly weak on launch, laughably so even. But during the PTB, the devs heard our complaints and buffed both of them to a respectable level on launch and afterwards too. Springtrap on the other hand has gotten basically nothing since the PTB besides add-on nerfs. Despite being a C tier killer and add-ons like this still being in the game, I guess having any sense of direction in these shitty doors is just too powerful, right? Or the undetectable is just too powerful. Well, you should see where I'm going with this. In this community, if you don't blindly praise Springtrap, you'll be crucified by emotional lolcows. Its hitbox for
Skill
is
issue.
way too big, leading you to it leaves an
Skill issue.
Killer instinct. Killer
It's not as easy to dodge as he says.
Some of which aren't
It just
110
sucks.
movement speed. And as one of the only DBD YouTubers who's prepared to go against the grain and say it how it is, I'll say this is why Springtrap is so weak, because nobody is calling him weak because he's Springtrap. You know that whole thing that's going on right now where there's mass hysteria about why killer games are getting harder, despite killer in general getting massive buffs recently, like the removal of map offerings and normalized survivor spawns? I'll tell you why. It's because after the FNAF chapter, everyone was trying out Springtrap for most of their games, and this is the first time since Dredge, 3 years ago by the way, that we've had a truly weak or shitty killer with no redeeming qualities versus the modern landscape of Dead by Daylight. Most people have abandoned him by now, but that's my theory, and nobody wants to admit it because it's FNAF and DBD, and this is what we wanted. How could it be bad? Behavior is likely not going to buff Springtrap for the foreseeable future, because everyone is plugging their ears and saying he's alright and leading to no constructive feedback. This is what it looks like when they don't get any feedback and we just pretend everything is okay, by the way. And okay, so how is he C tier? I mean, at the very least he has a ranged zoning power, and he can hit you at mid-range and over palace and windows. Just like Huntress and Deathslinger and Plague and Pyramid Head and Twins and Trickster and Nemesis and Pinhead and Artist and Xenomorph and Unknown and Vecna and Dracula and Houndmaster, right? Ignoring the fact that his ability has all the weaknesses of these abilities with none of their strengths, him just having the ability to do that surely puts him higher than C tier, right? I mean, I've already talked about how easy the axe is to dodge, but let me also mention how long it takes to wind up and how useless the mechanics surrounding it are. They just exist to make it look like there's something new. Why does it explode into an AoE bubble if you can't leave it in an area for more than like 15 seconds without it expiring? You can't leave it on a generator or a doorway or anything, so what's actually the point besides checking lockers, I guess? Why does the axe stay in the survivor and give the survivor control over when you get it back? I know you can recall it manually, but it still takes forever, and the animation of him recalling it slows him down for some reason. Like, why? I would understand this if it was an extremely oppressive chase tool like Victor, but this makes absolutely no sense. As a survivor, the only issue with having the axe in you is that he gets shitty wall hacks on you and he moves at 115 speed. Why isn't he always 115 speed? Why is this even like a gimmick? If someone's holding W for a long time, sometimes you have to throw your axe and get rid of it to move at normal killer speed, and that slows you down too. People were actually calling him the best range killer in the game on launch. But with all these drawbacks and nothing new or powerful about him, he's honestly the worst. And you want to know something else? Those killers, while having debatably slightly stronger or weaker range attacks in Springtrap, don't actively buff survivors in the trial by just existing. Let me paint you a picture. Do you know those moments you have as Singularity where there's a survivor hooked, and you see another one in the biopod, and oh wait, you don't play Singularity, hold on, let me try that again. So do you know those moments you have as Knight where one survivor is being chased by a guard? Actually, wait, you don't play Knight either. Let me, give me a second, okay? Do you know those moments you have as Blight where you know one survivor is vaguely in one area of the map, one survivor is on hook, and you're actively chasing another one? This knowledge of where survivors generally are is very valuable for decision making, because survivors only move at 4 meters per second, and they can't randomly teleport from one side of the map to the other with no warning or risk. Knowing where everyone is lets you play the macro game much better, and it can influence your decision making skills, letting you know what you should do next based on the info you have. So let me paint you this picture. You're in the exact same scenario as Springtrap, and a survivor takes one of your doors to get across the entire map and get a hook save in like 10 seconds, and now all of your pressure is destroyed. For this reason, I believe Springtrap easily has the worst macro in the entire game, and it's not even close. Having survivors randomly be able to teleport across the map with barely any risk completely obliterates your knowledge and decision making. It's like every survivor having the hand of Vecna with barely any cooldown or randomness involved, without injuring themselves, and they can decide where they go. And the hand of Vecna is still a stupid mechanic. And I know what you're gonna say. You're gonna say, oh, there's a risk to it because Springtrap can grab you in the office, right? Not really. Look, I initially thought you would simply grab any survivor using the doors when you use them, but no, you have to be either going to or from the door that they're opening. Why is this even a thing? This means you and a survivor could both be wandering through the office at the same time, but since you didn't go to their door and they're not going to yours, you just walk past each other? Like, it's so dumb. Why give survivors such a broken ability like this for you just existing in the match and then make the risk factor basically being RNG? It's so brain dead. There's more too. At the very least, you can use the doors to sneak up on people, right? No, because the monitors on the doors will start flashing when you're about to come to indicate to the survivor to start pre-running 10 seconds in advance. And he's already really weak to pre-running. Why is this even a thing? Why do we have brain dead killers like Blight in the game without this ridiculous level of built-in counterplay? But Springtrap needs to give you a 10-second warning when he's using his generic reskin teleport ability. At the very least with Xenomorph, you have to spend time setting up a turret to hear the beeping, but this is just ridiculous. It's so babyfied, you don't have to do anything. And that's not all. I initially thought in my original video that survivors would just choose to ignore the cameras and only use the doors for teleporting, because there's not really a reward for finding Springtrap on the cameras, like getting him out of his power or something. But no, the cameras are incredibly broken and abusable, especially in Swift, but isn't everything, right? You can no shit have one person in a chase and another person on the cameras just staring at Springtrap and getting free wall hacks for the entire chase with no real downside. And you can see him and scan him through walls too. You can genuinely have permanent wall hacks on him during chase until the battery runs out if one survivor is just sitting on cameras and staring at him, and he's 110 and he has a shitty chase power. There has genuinely never been another killer with this much bullshit going against them for just simply playing the killer. And no amount of farmed trick shots will change my mind that he's a low C tier killer, because even if there were no cameras at all and only he could use his doors, he would still be pretty shit because his chase power is so easy to outplay. At the very least, he's very fun to play against as Survivor with all these mechanics and shit, but I feel like this stuff should just be mechanics for maps or game modes, not just for the killer you're playing as or against. If there was a FNAF style game mode with these doors and cameras so lower mobility killers could go through the doors and killers with less info could look through the cameras, that'd be pretty fun. The survivors being able to use them too would not feel so bad. Instead, all these mechanics just exist to punish a killer who doesn't need them, and it's awful. When my initial video came out, the thousands of comments and multiple response videos could not prove me wrong about his power being boring recycled garbage. So I dare you guys, I won this one. So maybe take a deep breath and try again. Can you explain to me exactly how this killer is A tier or the best range killer in the game when he has so much working against him? What an absolute disappointment of a chapter. And we only have ourselves to blame here because everyone just ate this shit up. But the honeymoon phase is over and everyone is realizing I was right, as I usually am. I know he has other minor benefits like the undetectable, which still just feels like a status effect band-aid fix, or the axe grab, which is just for show and he could still be blinded and stunned out of it, by the way. But apparently this undetectable effect with the loud-ass footsteps, unless you buy the pay-to-win skin, was too good because even his add-ons affecting it had been nerfed. You could always hear him from like 20 meters away even when he was undetectable, like old Dredge style, because survivors are so traumatized after having to learn the unique counterplay of Gould that they need to be babied in every possible way when it comes to counterplay, and I wouldn't be surprised if the next stealth killer we get has a big red arrow showing where they are in the minimap at the bottom right of your screen. Despite all these FNAF fans spurging out over the new chapter like a month ago, this one has absolutely no staying power. It's just brain dead hype. The map is awful, the killer is recycled and weak, and there's no survivor. I've already heard rumors of a FNAF chapter part 2 with the Mimic as a killer, and that would fit my concept for what would actually make a good FNAF killer much more closely than just reskinning an already overplayed killer and somehow making them worse in every possible way. I honestly feel like we just need a complete do-over, and if the Resident Evil chapter is anything to go off, behavior will likely make a FNAF chapter 2 due to the player count peaking. The issue with that though is it will definitely be more than a year from now until it comes out. But let's hope if that happens, we actually get an interesting indoor map, a unique and fun killer, and maybe even a survivor, because this felt like a fucking mid-chapter paragraph for what was supposed to be the game's biggest license ever. But yeah, this should be my last video on Springtrap. I just wanted to say it how it is, as I always do. Genuinely the weakest killer since Dredge, and I can't call him worse in design than someone like Skull Merchant, because he just takes what provably works from other killers and does them worse, because they played this chapter way too safe. But I can certainly say he's worse to me, because even though it completely flopped, at least Skull Merchant tried to do something new, and you can't really compare her to like 10 other better and more unique and more fun and more interesting killers. But yeah, that's basically all I had to say. Stay mad and make no good points and say skill issue. Okay, yeah, that's all.